So today we're going to be talking about the Indiana Fever, and this is a question that some people have been pointing out, and it's, should the Indiana Fever tank this year? Because if you guys don't know, they're right now not in the lottery when it comes to the WNBA draft. Before we get on to it though, if you guys are new to the channel, subscribe. We are trying to hit 9.7k by the end of the day, and right now we're about 75k. Jesus. But when it comes to the WNBA draft, it is very interesting. If you guys don't know, it's based on 2 years. And it's all based on if you don't make the playoffs, it is the teams who had the worst record over a 2-year period. So if you actually look, like Tankathon has a WNBA thing right here. So if you look at the records, it's all based on 2 years. So the Indiana Fever, while being in the playoffs, cannot be in the lottery. But as of right now, they have the worst 2-year record, even more than the Mystics and the Liberty. Or not the Liberty, sorry, the Sparks. I keep calling the LA Sparks the Liberty. But they, even over the Mystics and the Sparks, and the Sky have the 3rd worst record, and the garbage Dallas Wings have the 4th worst, because Dallas were good. So you can see here, like 3-11, 22-29. Like, so they were last season, what were they? Or 22-18 last season? So they had an above 500 record. If you're looking at the Washington Mystics, they had a near 500 record last year, whereas the 13-27 Dallas or Indiana Fever had one of the weaker records. If you're looking at teams that had really bad records last year, the Phoenix Mercury had the worst record last year. They won 9 games, but the Phoenix Mercury might end up being one of the best teams in WNBA this season. Like, they're not in tank mode because they owe the New York Liberty their picks. So you're looking the way the trades are. Obviously, Chicago owe Dallas their pick, whoever gets it first. So Dallas legitimately, if they're not going to make the playoffs, and if Chicago don't make the playoffs, it's like the likelihood is that Dallas could have, or there's a possibility, legitimate possibility that Dallas have a above 50% chance of number 1 overall pick. But when it comes to the Fever, they have their own pick. And the question is like, they're very clearly one player away. They're very, very clearly one player away from being like legitimately having one of the best cores in the WNBA. Like NaLyssa Smith, I don't know the fit of NaLyssa Smith, but the talent level is there. Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark, you're not getting off either of them. And look, you're probably keeping Kelsey Mitchell. You're probably going to keep Kelsey Mitchell. She's a free agent this year, but you're probably keeping her. This is a team that has a max contract slot. So, an ideal scenario, they get Paige Beckers. That is an ideal scenario. But if you want to look at this is a way too early mock draft right here. If you want to look at the mock draft, obviously Paige Beckers is expected to go number 1. If Indiana get this pick, great. You can put Paige Beckers in because she's got somewhat decent height size. You can put her in at the 3, play her as a secondary ball handler, and kind of have a double point guard lineup of Clark and Paige. Paige is going to be a much better getting the ball to Clark than a Christy Wallace would. She would be a huge upgrade over Christy Wallace. Nisa Morrow, guard. They don't need Nisa Morrow. If you can get Kiki, that is a really big one there. But Kiki's probably going to go number 2. After that, I don't like any of these players to Indiana. Almost all undersized guards. Almost the entirety of the first round are undersized guards after Paige and what's her name? Kiki. So I think for the Fever, it's more important that they win games this year than it is to get an extra piece. Because they already have the players there. And they're not going to be stuck with giving a max contract slot that's free to Erica Wheeler. They're not going to be stuck doing that like they were 5 years ago. Or not 5 years, 2 years ago. When nobody wants to play in Indiana. They've been a pathetic franchise. This is a team. How many wing shooters? Like, if you are a wing shooter and if you're an elite 3-and-D player. Again, I don't know what the free agency status is of, like, Lainey Hamilton. But I know people are like, why would Dejanay Carrington leave Connecticut? I don't think they can afford to pay as much as Indiana could. Like, I don't know what the way the contracts are, but surely you can't have 4 max contract players on your team. To be fair, I think the Aces have that, but I think Plum is on a fairly okay deal. But when it comes to this team, if you can put Dejanay Carrington in there at the 3, now that becomes one of the best 3 or 4 starting 5s in the league. 1 through 5, it becomes one of the most dangerous starting 5s in the entire league. If you can find a player like that. So I'm just trying to think, because everyone's like, oh, players won't go to Indiana. But they have the money. They have the money to pay basically whatever they want. They can pay the max that they physically can pay. And if you're looking at what they need, if you're a 3-and-D player, surely you're thinking, I might get overpaid. I might get overpaid to fill a need. Like, this is a team that has a massive Christy Wallace problem. And if I'm there to fill that problem, then we're good. So if you look at 2025 free agents right here, so you're seeing Taurasi. Like, you don't need Taurasi. Natasha Howard's been injured. Erica Wheeler sucks. And you're getting off her $220,000 a year contract. So like Bree Jones is on a max contract. Alyssa Thomas is on a max contract. DeWanna Bonner's on a max contract. All of them out of contract. So you got 3 max contract players. And then you have, how far do you have to scroll? Because I think Dejanay Carrington, to be fair, she's probably just off a rookie deal. She's just off $64,000 a year. I don't think the Connecticut Sun can afford to pay her $250,000 there or thereabouts. But I know they can obviously pay the most, but I don't think they can afford to keep all their free agents. Whereas a team that can are the Fever. And she'd be the perfect player. So you're just looking at other players. Obviously, Breanna Stewart's not going there. NECA's not going there. DeWanna Bonner's not leaving. She's not leaving Alyssa Thomas. Satsu's been sitting out a year. She's still probably not going anywhere. Vandersloot, don't need her. Hines Allen, don't need her. You definitely don't need Isabel Harrison. But you're looking through all these players and you're like, there are players. There are players that you can add to this team. Like, you just need one. You just need one really good 3-and-D player. Like, obviously, you're now going into the kind of players on rookie deals where you don't really want any of them. If you can figure out a way, there's a bunch of restricted free agents. Carrington's a restricted free agent. But still, I assume it's a similar way WNBA or in the NBA where you can offer a max and they have to match it. I don't know what's way the salaries are. But if not, you're looking at even just wings. Because, like, you have to keep Kelsey Mitchell. You probably are going to keep Kelsey Mitchell. I think what free agents are available there. Like, Wickham, not the worst player to add in. If you can somehow manage to convince, like, a Sabally out of Dallas if she gets back from injury. Heck, if you could convince a Bree Jones, maybe they can afford to keep Carrington. They can't afford to keep Bree Jones. And you put Bree Jones in that team and try to put in Alyssa Smith at the 3. Or maybe find a way of trying to move in Alyssa Smith for somebody else. Then we might be talking, like, because I think Bree Jones is a player that could really play with Aaliyah Boston. Even though they're both kind of centers. So there's a lot of ways they can go about it. This is not a team that needs to tank. This is a team that needs to learn to win. Because this has been an incompetent franchise and they've been losing for 10 years. So what you can't afford to do is turn Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark into losers. You can lose for your first couple of years in the league. What you can't do is be continuously losers. So all these elite players they're drafting, they're just being put in without their vets. Like, this is a team where you're like, they're one piece. Because Tammy's coming back. Tammy's probably coming off the bench. They have a massive Christy Wallace problem. And once they fix the Christy Wallace problem, and Caitlin Clark gets a year older and better, Aaliyah Boston shows up next season in shape, they have the potential to be one of the best young teams in WNBA. And this is a team in 3 to 4 years' time you're looking at, okay, yeah, then maybe they could be one of the best. But all they need to do in free agency or via the draft is get that replacement. And I will say, you're not going to get that replacement in the draft unless you fluke and get number 1. And I don't think there's a point tanking for, like, potentially a 10% chance of getting the number 1. Especially when tanking will come at the detriment of the development of, like, your they've got a big four, but like they're real big two in Leah Boston and Caitlin Clark. The team will gain more from Caitlin Clark and Leah Boston developing and trying to win, developing their games, than they will for tanking for Paige. As good as Paige is going to be, because they have a max free agency contract slot, and there are a lot of really good free agents they can put in, and literally all they have to just be is better than they just have to be better than Christy Wallace. It's all the free agents have to be.